The Monday after the farmer's market incident, Marcus was working in his greenhouse when a black luxury car pulled into his driveway. He watched through the glass walls as a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, Richard Winters, Patricia's husband. Marcus wiped his hands on his work pants and walked out to meet him, prepared for a confrontation. "Mr. Johnson," Richard said formally, extending his hand. "I believe we need to talk." To Marcus's surprise, Richard's handshake was firm and respectful, not aggressive or threatening. "Let's sit on the porch," Marcus suggested, gesturing to the wooden chairs his grandfather had built decades ago. Once seated, Richard got straight to the point. "I want to apologize for my wife's behavior. I had no idea she was stealing from you and the other farmers." Marcus studied the man's face, looking for signs of deception but finding none. "You really didn't know?" Richard shook his head. "Patricia told me she had arrangements with local farmers for specialty produce. I believed her. I even wrote checks that I thought were going to you all." He sighed heavily. "She's been keeping 2 sets of books." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing this new information. "That's quite a shock for you, I imagine." "It is," Richard admitted. "But that's no excuse for what she did. I've come with an offer to make things right." From his briefcase, Richard pulled out a document and handed it to Marcus. It was a bank check for $30,000, made out to Marcus Johnson. "This should cover the stolen produce and lost business," Richard explained. "I've made similar arrangements with the other affected farmers." Marcus looked at the check, momentarily speechless. It was more than fair compensation, generous, even. "There's more," Richard continued. "Patricia will be issuing a public apology in the town newspaper tomorrow. She's also agreed to perform community service." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Community service?" "Yes, the judge suggested working on a farm might be appropriate. Would you be willing to supervise her? 3 hours a week for 6 months. Marcus almost laughed at the thought of Patricia Winters, with her designer clothes and perfect manicure, digging in the dirt of his farm, but then he considered the educational value. "I'll do it," he agreed. "But she'll have to work like anyone else here. No special treatment." Richard nodded. "That's fair. And one last thing. Patricia's dinner parties. What about them? She actually is a talented cook, and she does love farm-fresh ingredients. Would you be willing to sell to her, legitimately this time? She'll pay premium prices." Marcus thought about it. "If she comes during business hours and pays like everyone else, I don't see why not." The 2 men shook hands again, this agreement feeling like the beginning of something important. 2 weeks later, Patricia arrived for her first day of community service. She wore brand new overalls and work boots that had clearly never been used. The smell had finally faded, but the memory clearly hadn't. She couldn't quite meet Marcus's eyes. "We're planting seedlings today," Marcus told her, handing her a pair of work gloves. "I'll show you how." To his surprise, Patricia turned out to be a quick learner. Despite her initial reluctance, she seemed to find satisfaction in the physical work. By the end of her first session, she had planted an entire row of baby lettuce. "I never realized how much work goes into growing food," she admitted as she washed her hands at the outdoor sink. "Most people don't," Marcus replied. "That's why it has value." Over the following months, something unexpected happened. Patricia's community service became more than just punishment. She began asking questions about organic farming, soil health, and sustainable growing practices. Sometimes she would bring recipes to share during lunch breaks. By spring, Patricia had started her own small garden at home, calling Marcus occasionally for advice. She still hosted dinner parties, but now she proudly told guests exactly where each ingredient came from, giving credit to the local farmers and paying fair prices for everything she used. The final day of Patricia's community service coincided with the planting of Marcus's new heirloom tomato varieties. As they worked side by side, Patricia asked, "Do you think I could grow these at home?" Marcus smiled and handed her a small pot with a tomato seedling. "Start with this one. It's called Peace Offering, a new variety I developed this winter." Patricia accepted the plant carefully. "I think I've learned my lesson, Marcus." "I think you have too," he agreed, looking out over his farm, where new crops were sprouting in neat rows under the spring sun. "Sometimes the most valuable things we grow aren't plants at all." Ray looked at his motorcycle and then back at Tommy. He couldn't leave the boy alone, but he also couldn't take him back toward potential danger. Scanning the parking lot, he spotted an older couple getting out of their car. "Tommy, we need to get you somewhere safe first," Ray said. "Then I can go help your mom." Ray waved to the couple and jogged over with Tommy, quickly explaining the situation. The woman, a retired nurse named Helen, immediately took Tommy's hand and promised to stay with him until police arrived. Her husband agreed to wait at the trailhead to direct officers when they came. "Tommy, can you tell me what the men looked like?" Ray asked, kneeling down again. "One had a black hat and a blue shirt. The other one was tall with a red face and yellow hair," Tommy said. "They had a knife. I saw it." Ray's expression hardened. A weapon made this even more dangerous, but also more urgent. He quickly checked his phone. Still 15 minutes until police would arrive. Too long. "Helen, please tell the officers I went to find Tommy's mom. The attack happened by Turtle Rock, about a quarter-mile in," Ray said. He showed her his driver's license so she could give his information to police. Ray jogged back to his motorcycle and opened the storage compartment. Inside was a small emergency kit, a powerful flashlight, and a hunting knife he kept for camping trips. He secured the knife to his belt and put the flashlight in his jacket pocket. Before heading to the trail, he paused to think. Charging in blindly would be dangerous. Ray had served 4 years in the Army before his construction career, and his training kicked in. He needed a plan. The trail to Turtle Rock was mostly straight with few hiding spots. If the attackers saw him coming, they might hurt Tommy's mom or flee deeper into the woods. Ray remembered a maintenance path that ran parallel to the main trail, used by park rangers. It wasn't on the public maps, but he had discovered it on previous hikes. Moving quickly but quietly, Ray found the narrow path hidden behind a cluster of bushes. It was overgrown but passable. He moved through the undergrowth, staying low and watching for movement ahead. The maintenance path would let him approach Turtle Rock from an unexpected direction. 5 minutes of careful movement brought him within sight of the landmark boulder. Ray crouched behind a fallen tree and listened. At first, he heard nothing over the normal forest sounds. Then he caught a woman's voice, frightened but angry. "Just take the money and leave me alone." A man's voice responded, too low for Ray to make out the words. Carefully, Ray peered around the tree trunk. About 30 yards away, he could see Tommy's mom. She was standing with her back against a tree, facing 2 men who matched Tommy's description. The man in the black hat was holding her purse, dumping the contents on the ground. The tall blond man stood closer to her, a knife in his hand. Ray's heart pounded. The woman's eyes were wide with fear, but she stood defiantly. She was looking for a chance to run, but the man with the knife blocked her path. Ray needed to create a distraction. Direct confrontation would be too risky with a knife involved. He noticed a cluster of rocks near his position. If he could draw at least one of the men away, he might have a better chance of helping Tommy's mom. Picking up a rock, Ray took a deep breath. 20 years ago, he had been trained for combat situations. He never imagined those skills would be needed on a peaceful hiking trail, but here he was. Ray's mind raced through possible scenarios as he prepared to act. Whatever happened next would happen fast. The safety of Tommy's mom depended on his next move. Ray tossed the rock far to his right, where it crashed loudly through branches and hit the ground with a thud. As he hoped, both men turned toward the sound. "What was that?" the blond man said, gripping his knife tighter. "Probably just a deer," his partner answered, but he looked nervous. "Go check it out," the blond man ordered. "I'll watch her." The man in the black hat hesitated, but then moved toward the noise, leaving the path and pushing into the bushes. This was the opportunity Ray needed. One attacker separated from the other. Ray circled silently through the trees until he was behind the man searching for the source of the noise. The man was about 20 feet away from his partner now, looking in the wrong direction. Ray picked up a thick branch from the ground and approached from behind. Before the man could turn around, Ray brought the branch down on his shoulder, hard enough to drop him to his knees, but not to cause serious injury. The man cried out in pain and surprise as he fell. The blond man with the knife spun around at the sound. "Mike, what's going on?" Ray quickly pressed his knee into the fallen man's back and grabbed his arms, twisting them behind him. The man struggled, but Ray held firm. "Your friend is done," Ray called out in a commanding voice. "Police are on their way. Drop the knife now." The blond man's eyes widened with fear and anger. He looked at Tommy's mom, then back toward Ray's voice. For a moment, Ray thought he might run. Instead, the man pulled Tommy's mom in front of him like a shield, holding the knife to her side. "I don't see any cops," the man shouted. "Come out where I can see you or I'll cut her." Ray's mind raced. The situation had just become more dangerous. Under his knee, the first attacker continued to struggle. Ray needed to keep him restrained while dealing with his partner. "The knife isn't worth adding years to your sentence," Ray called back, trying to sound calm. "Right now this is just robbery. You haven't hurt anyone yet." The blond man laughed, a harsh sound that echoed between the trees. "Yeah? And who are you supposed to be?" Ray had to think fast. He looked down at the man he had captured and saw a roll of duct tape sticking out of his jacket pocket, probably brought to tie up their victim. With one quick movement, Ray grabbed it and wrapped it around the man's wrists. "I'm just a guy who promised a scared little boy I'd bring his mom back safely," Ray answered, rising to his feet once the first attacker was secured. He saw uncertainty flicker across the blond man's face at the mention of the boy. Tommy's mom used that moment of distraction to drive her elbow hard into her captor's stomach. The man grunted in pain and his grip loosened, but he didn't let go completely. Ray moved into view now, stepping onto the path about 15 feet away from them. "It's over. The boy got away and found help. Police will be here any minute." The blond man looked at Ray, taking in his size, the determined look in his eyes, and a hunting knife now visible on his belt. For the first time, real fear showed on the attacker's face. "Back off. I'll let her go when I'm safely away," the man said, his voice less confident now. In the distance, they'd all heard what they'd been waiting for, the sound of sirens approaching the trailhead. The blond man's face fell as he realized his options were disappearing. Ray took a step closer. "You have a choice to make right now, and you need to make it fast." Tommy's mom caught Ray's eye. She gave him the smallest nod, and Ray understood. She was ready to act when the moment came. The tension between the three of them grew as the sirens got louder. The man with the knife looked desperately between his tied-up partner, the approaching sound of police, and the large biker standing before him. Whatever happened next would determine everyone's fate. The blond man's eyes darted back and forth as the sirens grew louder. His grip on Tommy's mom tightened, making her wince. Ray could see sweat beading on the man's forehead as panic began to take over. "I'm walking out of here," the man said, his voice shaking. "Don't follow me." He began to move backward, pulling Tommy's mom with him toward a narrow side trail that led deeper into the woods. Ray knew if the man got away with her, the situation could become much worse. "Let her go," Ray said firmly. "You still have time to surrender before this gets worse." "Shut up," the man shouted, clearly losing his composure. Behind Ray, the man tied up on the ground started yelling. "Don't leave me here, Darren. Come on, man." The blond man, Darren, looked even more panicked now that his partner had shouted his name. "Shut up, Mike. Just shut up." Ray seized on this mistake. "Darren and Mike, huh? Police will have your names before they even reach us." Tommy's mom was watching Ray carefully. He gave her a subtle nod, hoping she would understand his plan. Ray took another careful step forward, drawing Darren's attention fully to himself. "Stay back," Darren warned, waving the knife. Ray raised his hands to appear less threatening, but kept moving slowly forward. "You know you can't get far in these woods. Helicopter will be here soon. Trail's only got a few exits. All will be covered." While Ray spoke, he noticed Tommy's mom slowly shifting her weight, preparing herself. Her eyes were no longer showing fear, now they showed determination. Ray took one more step. "Police chief is my cousin," he lied smoothly. "You give up now, I'll put in a good word. No one's hurt yet." Darren's attention was fully on Ray now, the knife pointing his direction instead of at Tommy's mom. That was the moment she had been waiting for. In one swift motion, she stomped hard on Darren's foot and twisted away from him. Ray lunged forward as soon as she moved. Darren slashed wildly with the knife, but his balance was off from the pain in his foot. Ray caught his wrist mid-swing and twisted hard. The knife fell to the ground as Darren cried out in pain. Using his size advantage, Ray pushed Darren against a tree and held him there with a forearm across his chest. The man struggled but couldn't break free. "It's over," Ray said, breathing hard from the exertion. "Don't make it worse." Tommy's mom quickly kicked the knife away, then searched through her scattered belongings on the ground. She found a phone charger cord and brought it to Ray. "Will this work?" she asked, her voice steady despite everything that had happened. Ray nodded. Together they secured Darren's hands behind his back with the cord. Ray then marched him over to where his partner was still lying tied up on the ground. "Sit down next to your friend," Ray ordered. Darren glared but did as he was told. Tommy's mom stood nearby, catching her breath. Now that the danger had passed, she was shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "I'm Ray," he said simply, offering his hand. "Lisa," she replied, taking it. "My son." "Tommy's safe," Ray assured her quickly. "He's with a nice couple at the trailhead. He's the one who found me and told me you were in trouble." Relief washed over Lisa's face. "Thank God, and thank you. When I told him to run, I wasn't sure if he'd find help in time." The sirens were very close now, and they could hear voices calling from the main trail. "Over here," Ray shouted, waving his arms to get their attention. As they waited for the police to reach them, Lisa looked at Ray with grateful eyes. "How did you know what to do? Are you a police officer?" Ray shook his head. "Just a construction worker who used to be in the army." He glanced at the two men sitting defeated on the ground. "And someone who couldn't ignore a crying child asking for help." The sound of officers making their way through the underbrush grew louder. In moments, the clearing was filled with uniformed police securing the scene and taking statements. As one officer led Lisa toward the main trail to reunite with Tommy, she turned back to look at Ray one more time. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Police officers secured the scene, taking Darren and Mike away in handcuffs. Ray gave his statement to a serious-looking officer with a notebook, explaining how Tommy had found him in the parking lot and everything that followed. "You took a big risk going in there alone," the officer told Ray, closing his notebook. "But I understand why you did it. Time was critical." Ray nodded, watching as paramedics checked Lisa for injuries nearby. "I couldn't just wait. Not after seeing how scared that boy was." When the officer finished with him, Ray walked over to where Lisa sat on the back of an ambulance. She had a blanket around her shoulders though the day was warm. Ray knew it was for the shock, not the temperature. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Lisa managed a small smile. "Better now. They say I can go see Tommy in a few minutes." A paramedic was placing a small bandage on her arm where the knife had nicked her during the struggle. It wasn't deep, but seeing the injury made Ray's jaw tighten. He had gotten there just in time. "The officers told me what you did," Lisa said quietly. "Going through the woods alone, knowing they had a weapon." She looked up at him. "Most people wouldn't have done that for strangers." Ray shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have helped a kid like Tommy." "No," Lisa said firmly. "They wouldn't. And we both know it." Before Ray could respond, a police officer approached them. "Miss Carter, we're ready to take you to your son now." Lisa stood up quickly, eager to reunite with Tommy. She turned to Ray. "Would you come with me? Tommy will want to thank you too." Ray nodded and followed them down the trail toward the parking lot. As they walked, Lisa explained that she and Tommy had recently moved to the area after her divorce. They had been exploring local hiking trails on weekends as a way to connect in their new home. "I never thought something like this would happen here," she said. "It seemed so safe." When they reached the parking lot, Tommy was sitting in a police car with the door open, wrapped in a blanket similar to his mother's. An officer was showing him the car's radio system, keeping him distracted. When the boy looked up and saw his mother, his whole face lit up. "Mom!" Tommy shouted, jumping out of the car and running toward her. Lisa knelt down and caught him in a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. Ray stood back, giving them space for their reunion. He felt a lump form in his throat watching them. After a long moment, Tommy looked over his mother's shoulder and spotted Ray. His eyes widened. "You found her," the boy exclaimed. "You really did it." Lisa stood, keeping one arm around Tommy's shoulders as they walked over to Ray. "This is the man who helped me," Lisa told Tommy. "His name is Ray." Tommy looked up at Ray with pure admiration. "You're like a superhero." Ray chuckled and knelt down to Tommy's level. "No superhero, buddy, just someone who was in the right place at the right time." "You were super brave," Tommy insisted. "Like the heroes in my books." An officer approached them, explaining that they needed to take Lisa and Tommy to the station for formal statements. Before they left, Lisa pulled a card from her purse and handed it to Ray. "This has my number on it," she said. "I'd like to thank you properly when this is all over. Maybe coffee?" Ray took the card, surprised by the offer. "I'd like that." As Lisa and Tommy walked away with the officers, the boy turned back and waved at Ray. Something about that wave, the pure trust and gratitude in the child's eyes, hit Ray deep in his chest. He watched until the police car carrying them disappeared down the road. Then he turned toward his motorcycle, still parked where he'd left it when Tommy first ran to him with those 4 desperate words. The date had started as a simple ride through the countryside. Now, as the sun began to set over the trees, Ray knew something important had changed. Not just for Lisa and Tommy, but for him too. 3 days later, Ray sat at a corner table in the Main Street Cafe, checking his watch. It was 5 minutes before the time he and Lisa had agreed to meet. After the incident, he had texted her once to make sure she and Tommy were doing all right. She had suggested meeting for coffee once the police interviews were finished. Ray felt strangely nervous. He hadn't expected to feel this way about a simple thank you coffee. He was wearing a clean button-up shirt instead of his usual work clothes or riding gear. The waitress had already refilled his water twice. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Lisa walked in. She looked different than she had on the trail, her brown hair loose around her shoulders, wearing jeans and a simple blue blouse. She spotted Ray and smiled, walking toward his table. "Hi," she said, sitting down across from him. "Sorry if I'm late." "You're not late at all," Ray assured her. "How are you and Tommy doing?" Lisa ordered a coffee when the waitress came by, then turned back to Ray. "We're doing better than I expected, actually. Tommy had a nightmare the first night, but he's been talking about what happened. The counselor says that's healthy." "And you?" Ray asked. He noticed the small bandage still on her arm. "I'm okay, still a little jumpy when I hear unexpected noises." She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug when it arrived. "The police called yesterday. They said Darren and Mike confessed to 3 other robberies on hiking trails in the next county. They were working their way through the state parks." Ray nodded. "I'm glad they caught them." "Because of you," Lisa said firmly. "The officer told me they might never have found them without your help. They were using fake names, moving around constantly." Ray shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what seemed right at the time." They talked for nearly an hour. Ray learned that Lisa was an elementary school teacher who had moved to town for a fresh start after her divorce was finalized last year. Tommy was 7 and loved science and adventure books. Ray found himself telling her about his roofing business, his weekend motorcycle trips, and his quiet life in a small house on the edge of town. "Tommy hasn't stopped talking about you," Lisa said with a small laugh. "He told his whole class about the brave biker who rescued his mom." Ray smiled, feeling his face grow warm. He's a brave kid himself. Not many children would have kept their head like he did, finding help so quickly. A comfortable silence fell between them. Ray realized he was enjoying Lisa's company in a way he hadn't enjoyed anyone's in a long time. Lisa took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Tommy and I are going to the Children's Museum this Saturday. He asked if you might want to come along." Ray looked up in surprise. "Me?" "Only if you want to," Lisa added quickly. "No pressure. I know you probably have other plans." "I'd like that," Ray interrupted gently. "If you're sure it's not an imposition." "It's not," Lisa said, relief in her voice. "Tommy would be thrilled. And," she hesitated, "I'd enjoy the company too." As they finished their coffee and made plans for Saturday, Ray thought about how quickly life could change. 3 days ago, he had been a solitary man with a simple routine. Then a frightened boy had run up to him with 4 desperate words, and suddenly new possibilities were opening before him. Outside the cafe, as they prepared to say goodbye, Lisa surprised him by giving him a quick hug. "Thank you again," she said softly. "Not just for what you did on the trail, but for giving Tommy and me back our sense of safety. That means more than you know." Ray watched her walk to her car, feeling something unfamiliar but welcome spreading through his chest. A warmth he hadn't felt in years. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine. Ray stood in front of his bathroom mirror, trying to decide if he should wear his hair tied back or loose. He had changed his shirt twice already. It had been years since he'd felt this kind of nervous excitement. At 10 o'clock, Ray pulled up in front of Lisa's small blue house in his pickup truck. He had decided against bringing the motorcycle today. His palms were sweaty as he walked to the front door and knocked. The door flew open almost immediately. Tommy stood there with a huge grin, wearing a dinosaur shirt and practically bouncing with energy. "Ray, you came," the boy exclaimed, as if he couldn't quite believe it. Lisa appeared behind her son, smiling warmly. "Right on time," she said. "Tommy's been watching out the window for 20 minutes. I didn't want to miss you," Tommy explained seriously. The Children's Museum was bustling with weekend visitors. Tommy walked between Ray and Lisa, occasionally reaching up to hold both their hands when the crowd got thick. The simple gesture made Ray's heart feel strangely full. "Look," Tommy pointed to a display about paleontology. "They have real dinosaur bones you can touch." For the next 2 hours, Ray found himself being pulled from exhibit to exhibit by an enthusiastic 7-year-old. Tommy wanted to show him everything: the water table where boats could be sailed through miniature locks, the bubble-making station, the room where kids could build and test flying machines. Lisa walked beside them, watching her son with obvious joy. "I haven't seen him this excited in a long time," she whispered to Ray when Tommy was distracted by a display about electricity. "He's a great kid," Ray replied. "Smart, too." "He likes you," Lisa said. "That means a lot to me. He hasn't connected with many adults since the divorce." When they reached the museum cafe for lunch, Tommy insisted on sitting next to Ray. The boy peppered him with questions about motorcycles, construction, and whether Ray had ever seen a real rocket launch. "Maybe someday we could ride on your motorcycle," Tommy asked hopefully between bites of his sandwich. "Tommy," Lisa said with a warning tone, "that's not appropriate to ask." "It's okay," Ray assured her. "Maybe when you're a bit older, buddy, and with a proper helmet and your mom's permission, we could take a very slow ride around the block." Tommy's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? You promise?" Ray glanced at Lisa, who gave a small nod. "I promise," he told Tommy, "when the time is right." As they finished lunch, Ray noticed a man at a nearby table staring at them intently. When their eyes met, the man quickly looked away. Something about his expression made Ray uncomfortable. "Everything okay?" Lisa asked, noticing his change in mood. Before Ray could answer, the man approached their table. "Excuse me," he said, looking nervous. "Are you the biker who helped catch those trail robbers last week?" Ray hesitated, instinctively moving slightly closer to Tommy. "Yes, that's me." The man's face broke into a relieved smile. "I thought so. My wife showed me the article in the paper." He extended his hand. "My sister was robbed by the same men 2 months ago at Pancras Park. They got away with her wedding ring and hurt her shoulder pretty badly." Ray shook the man's hand, surprised. "I didn't know there was an article." "Front page of the local section," the man said. "They interviewed the police chief about it." He looked at all three of them. "I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you, my sister will get her grandmother's ring back." After the man left, Tommy looked up at Ray with even more admiration than before. "You're famous now," he said excitedly. Lisa laughed. "Looks that way." Ray felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. "I'm just glad I could help." As they walked through the rest of the museum, Ray noticed people looking at him differently, with whispers and nods of recognition. The story had clearly spread through the small town. Ray, who had always valued his privacy and quiet life, wasn't sure how he felt about this unexpected attention. But watching Tommy's joy as they explored each exhibit, and catching Lisa's warm smile when their eyes met, he found he didn't mind it too much after all. 6 months had passed since that fateful day when Tommy ran to Ray in the parking lot. Autumn had turned to winter, and now the first signs of spring were appearing around town. Ray's life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. On this particular Sunday morning, Ray stood in his driveway, carefully polishing his motorcycle. The weather was finally warm enough for riding again. Tommy sat on the front steps of Ray's house, watching with fascination. "Can I help?" Tommy asked, jumping up eagerly. "Sure, buddy," Ray said, handing him a clean cloth. "Just gentle circles, like I showed you last time." Lisa emerged from the house carrying 3 glasses of lemonade on a tray. She had been inside preparing lunch while Ray and Tommy worked on the bike. Her smile when she looked at them together made Ray's heart skip a beat, just as it had been doing for months now. "How's it coming along?" she asked, setting the tray on a small table. Almost ready for the season, Ray replied, taking a glass gratefully. Their relationship had developed slowly and naturally after that day at the museum. Weekend outings had turned into family dinners, which had led to movie nights and helping Tommy with his science projects. Ray had fixed the leaking roof on Lisa's house, while she had added small touches to his bachelor home that made it feel warmer. 3 weeks ago, Ray had finally worked up the courage to ask Lisa on a proper date, just the two of them. Tommy had stayed with a friend from school while Ray took Lisa to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. That night, under a sky full of stars, they had shared their first kiss. The trail safety meeting is at 2 o'clock, Lisa reminded him. Do you want to eat before or after? After the incident, Ray had joined the local park safety committee. His experience had made him passionate about improving trail security. The committee had already installed emergency call boxes at key points throughout the park system and started a volunteer trail patrol program. Ray led one of the weekend patrol groups. Let's eat first, Ray suggested. Those meetings can run long. Tommy had moved on from polishing to asking questions about the motorcycle's engine. Ray patiently explained each part, impressed by how quickly the boy absorbed information. At 7, almost 8 now, Tommy was already showing an interest in how things worked that reminded Ray of himself at that age. The doorbell rang, interrupting their lesson. I'll get it, Lisa said, heading inside. She returned a moment later with a man in a police uniform, Officer Jenkins, who had been first on the scene that day on the trail. Hope I'm not interrupting, Jenkins said, nodding a greeting to Ray and Tommy. Not at all, Ray replied, wiping his hands on a clean rag. What brings you by? Good news, Jenkins said with a smile. Darren and Mike were sentenced yesterday, 10 years each. With their prior records, they'll serve most of it. Lisa let out a sigh of relief. The trial had been hanging over them for months, with delays and legal motions that kept postponing the conclusion. That's wonderful news, she said, instinctively putting her arm around Tommy's shoulders. There's more, Jenkins continued. The judge mentioned you specifically, Ray, said your actions showed the kind of community spirit that makes this town special. Ray shook his head modestly. I just did what anyone would do. No, Tommy piped up, looking at Ray with complete admiration. You did what a hero would do. The adults laughed, but there was truth in the boys' words that none of them could deny. Later, after Jenkins had left and lunch was finished, Ray and Lisa sat on the porch swing watching Tommy ride his bike up and down the sidewalk. Lisa's hand found Ray's, their fingers intertwining comfortably. Sometimes I think about how differently things could have turned out, Lisa said softly. If Tommy hadn't found you that day. Ray squeezed her hand, but he did. 4 words that changed everything. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the boy who had brought them together. Ray thought about how a single moment, a chance meeting in a parking lot, had given him the family he never knew he wanted. Sometimes the most life-changing journeys begin with the smallest steps, or in this case, with a child's desperate plea for help. I'm glad he found me, Ray said simply. Lisa leaned her head against his shoulder. So am I.